This is Fusion Capitalism, a clean energy vision for conservatives. Brought to you by industry leader and company CEO, Steve Malink. Here's Steve.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of Fusion Capitalism. This week, I'm having a conversation about a clean energy vision for the 21st century with Tyler Duvelius. Tyler has a plethora of political campaign and public policy experience that belies his age. He's a multiple winner of the John Kasich Award for Outstanding Male Ohio Young Republican of the Year and has been involved in campaigns since 2010. Now he's the executive director of the Ohio Conservative Energy Forum. Tyler, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
Tyler, you're clearly an ambitious young man with an extremely bright future, but you've gone against the grain of your party and have embraced clean energy. Where did your interest in and passion for clean energy come from?
You know, Steve, it is interesting. I have been on the Republican side of the political spectrum and still very much consider myself a Republican. However, I don't think it's necessarily contrarian to my party views. I think it's something that we're working as a party, as more conservative-minded folks to get towards. For me, I'm 27. I appreciate you for calling out my relatively young age there in the introduction. As a millennial, learning about clean energy and sustainability is just something that I grew up with. It was taught in school as I was going through elementary and high school and college. Clean energy and solar panels and wind turbines weren't just an idea of the future. They were the here and now. And I think that's something that I grew up comfortable with, the concept of understanding that we need to reduce, reuse, and recycle, that we need to look at alternative ways of procuring energy. And then, of course, as I matured more into my young adult phase, I started to see the very practical implications that clean energy in particular has for our country, whether we want to talk about economic dominance, whether we want to talk about military dominance, whether we want to talk about the fact that Ohio is the home to so many wonderful innovators, yourself included, but we're the home to Thomas Edison, to Neil Armstrong, to John Glenn, to the Wright brothers. And there's no reason that our best and brightest minds can't help lead Ohio in the clean energy future. And then also, this is Tyler Duvelius, the man, not Tyler Duvelius, executive director of the Ohio Conservative Energy Forum. But I've always felt a call in my faith. I'm a practicing Catholic, and you don't have to open your Bible very far before you see God's call right there in the first couple pages of Genesis to take care of his creation. So for me, this is personal and faith-driven just as much as about politics.
When I go to the website for Ohio Conservative Energy Forum, the headline reads, "Clean energy is the next tech breakthrough in a long line of Ohio innovations in air, space, and electricity." So you kind of touched on that as to while it's a ripe opportunity maybe for Ohio, what do you say about other states who are maybe struggling with the same thing where they don't have that history of innovation?
Innovation begins somewhere, right? I don't think that it's a mistake that as you look at clean energy development across America, and of course, my comfort zone is Ohio, but as you look at the clean energy development across America, there are plenty of red states that are leading the country in clean and renewable energy development. You think about Iowa, you think about Texas, you look at Arizona. I mean, there are just so many states out there that are leading that charge, and a lot of times they do it because they recognize, again, the economics of it. And I think it's worth noting that as governor, George W. Bush instituted a renewable portfolio standard in Texas and allowed the free market to go to work. And it did amazing things. The wind development was so heavy in the first couple of years, it actually surpassed that. And then Governor Rick Perry, future Department of Energy Secretary under President Trump, re-upped the standard, and they beat it again. And they continue to go forward, and they recognize the economic benefits. So for those states that maybe don't have the history and tradition of innovation that we have in Ohio, that's the 21st century. This is a new game, and it's up to us, I think, as Ohioans to determine whether or not we still want to lead that game in terms of innovation.
What would you say about Ohio's current position on clean energy? I mean, you mentioned Texas is kind of helping lead the way. They're a they're a conservative state for the most part. And you mentioned other states. I think most of them were mostly Republican. Where does Ohio stand on this big opportunity?
We have certainly we're starting to put in wind capacity. We're really starting to go after solar capacity here in the state. A lot of folks have started to call Ohio the solar belt of the Midwest, right? Where as weird as it sounds, Ohio really is well positioned to efficiently use solar energy and solar technologies. I think from a policy standpoint, obviously any of your listeners that stay tuned to energy news are probably aware of the current debate surrounding House Bill 6 and the allegations of scandal and corruption and what the possibilities of repeal, what the possibilities of replace might look like. And I think it's always in Ohioans' best interest to ensure that the General Assembly is taking a look at how to open up that free market production. It's my organization's view that we should really take a look at a number of issues, looking along the lines of wind setbacks, which dictate how far a wind turbine can be set back from a property line or from a home. And when they get too restrictive, as they are now, you start to run into problems in terms of people just being able to use their land as they see fit. We see it as a property rights issue. When you take a look at where subsidy money is going, maybe more towards nuclear energy or going to bail out aging coal plants. If we're going to subsidize energy, we have to be intellectually honest with ourselves and recognize that it's not the government's place to pick winners and losers, and that there has to be a relatively even playing field across the board. So those are some things that my organization always takes a look at to, how can Ohio continue to progress down this avenue of a diversified energy portfolio.
Very good. So last year, a poll released by your organization said that Ohio conservatives overwhelmingly support more clean energy. Would you say that policymakers in Ohio are using that type of polling data to change how they go about making new laws and setting new standards?
I think it's certainly, we release our polls as a way to help inform policymakers and decision makers. The thing about everybody wants cleaner air and cleaner water. I don't think you'll find too many people around that would dispute that. The thing to remember here, though, is there are very few folks that go to the polls and the first issue on their mind is energy, right? Unless we have this false equation as Americans where we seem to equate higher gas prices to clean energy for whatever reason, although it's not necessarily an apples to apples comparison. But I think what our poll serves to do is to inform the legislature to show that there is support among Ohio conservatives to see a more diversified energy portfolio, to see more clean energy in Ohio's pipelines. And I think as we look at our current situation, things that are going to dominate the minds of voters this year, namely the coronavirus pandemic. In Ohio, we have 114,000 clean energy jobs. Now we've lost about 20% of those jobs due to the pandemic. And as our legislators think about how do we rebuild our economy, how do we get back to where we were, we hope that our poll shows them that there is value in ensuring that we have clean energy jobs. There is value in making sure that our portfolio is diverse and sustainable.
So can you tell us more about the Ohio Conservative Energy Forum? When was it started? Are you the founder? Is there a membership of any sorts involved with it? Just tell us more about this organization.
So I was not the founder of the Ohio Conservative Energy Forum. I actually came on board in 2018 as the executive director, and the organization predates me a little bit. It was founded in 2015 as an avenue for Ohio conservatives to talk about a genuine all-of-the-above energy policy in the state of Ohio. When we say all of the above, we mean all of the above. We are not against coal or nuclear or natural gas or anything, but we recognize the value in a diversified energy portfolio. We started for the first several years really just to kind of focus our efforts on in terms of educating policymakers and stakeholders in and around the Ohio community. And then as time went on and as our organization grew and matured, we recognized the value in really taking our message out to Ohio in every corner of the state. So we've started a field program called the Land and Liberty Coalition that reaches out to the more rural parts of the state where a lot of the clean energy development is happening. A lot of times we see the more liberal cities in Ohio, that's Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland, the three C's, and then some of the others, they have these ambitious goals for a carbon-free energy future, and that's wonderful. But the fact of the matter is, you're not going to put a wind turbine up in the middle of downtown Columbus. That's going to be sited out in a more rural area. So we've started a field program to go talk to those more conservative areas of the state, and has really help drive an interest in our organization. We don't have necessarily a paid membership per se, but it's easy enough to join our email list and to stay in touch with what we're doing and how you can stay involved and make sure these messages are getting to those that are elected to serve you.
Does your forum acknowledge that climate change is real and an existential threat that must be solved by this generation? Or do you try to focus more on the opportunity of clean energy rather than the problem that must be solved?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Steve. I always remind people the E in OHCEF stands for energy, not environment. And we stay agnostic on the issue of whether or not climate change is an existential threat. I think particularly as you're talking to more conservative audiences, there's value to sticking true to the messaging of the economics of it, to the national security implications of it. For whatever reason, climate change has just become a buzzword in our political culture. And as we look forward and have those conversations with folks, we don't want to immediately turn people off to our message by going on heavy on climate change. Now, me personally, yeah, of course, I believe climate is changing and man probably has a large amount to do with that. But as an organization, we find it's just easier and best to reach out to conservatives by talking about the benefits clean energy is going to have for them in their personal lives.
Tyler, does your forum in Ohio have sister forums in other states across the U.S.?
We sure do. So they're very similar organizations to ours. Their messaging might be a little different. The nice thing about being conservatives is we believe in a ground up, not a top down approach. So our messaging might be a little bit different in each state. Our issues might be a little bit different. But on the whole, what we've done is really started to build this national base of conservatives who recognize the importance of clean energy in America's future, which has started to become a really powerful message, especially as we talk to our federally elected officials.
So do you experience headwinds from the fact that President Trump claims that climate change is a hoax? Does that work against what you and your sister forums are trying to accomplish?
It really doesn't. We take a look at state level action. And as a conservative, I believe in the concept of federalism and that the states are the best laboratories for clean energy production, especially as we're moving forward in this really innovative field. And again, that's one of the reasons we don't touch on climate change as much, is because we recognize that conservatives are very conservative folks who wholeheartedly believe in clean energy, yet aren't quite there on climate change. And so we don't want to exclude those people from the conversations. We want to make sure that we're driving our state-based conservative leaders to take actions toward a cleaner, more diverse energy portfolio. So we really haven't seen too much in the way of headwinds from the president. Actually, quite the contrary. I think as you look at some of the actions that his administration has taken, particularly through the Department of Energy, they're investing in solar technology and development. They're investing in all sorts of renewable R&D. And that's a positive step for America and our clean energy future as a country.
All right, Tyler, let's stop right there. Coming up in part 2 of my discussion with Tyler Duvelius, Executive Director of the Ohio Conservative Energy Forum, Tyler tells us why he thinks corporate America will lead the charge of our clean energy future.
I think as you start to see these CEOs and these business leaders move down that path and call for others to move down that path as well, that you're right, we don't always need the government to lead us. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, in fact, for the government to follow our best and brightest CEOs in this country and to use them as an example for what energy policy should look like moving forward.
Thanks for listening to Fusion Capitalism. To find out more about Steve Malink and his book, go to fusioncapitalism.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.